Out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there is a field. I'll meet you there. When the soul lies down in that grass, the world is too full to talk about. Ideas, language, even the phrase each other doesn't make any sense.
What is the field? Maybe after listening to that, you have some ideas, some thoughts. I actually hope that today you leave with more questions than answers. Because I love that this is a place where we don't just tell you, oh, this is exactly what this means. That we have different series, and the themes really can hit everyone in different ways. That this series can mean different things to different people. So I hope by the end of this series, we do have some practical ways to approach spirituality together in community, but I do want to leave it somewhat open to you that you don't need to figure it out per se. You know, for me, I actually have a little bit of a tough time trying to explain what our community is out in the world. Do any of you have this? Okay. Good to know I'm not alone. I was seeing my barber the other week, and I'm a pretty shy barber client. You know, I don't know what a barberie, is that what it is? I'm pretty shy in the barber's chair, so it takes me like 5 sessions to actually open up. So I've been going to this guy since I moved here, but this is the first time we actually had like a real conversation about our lives. And so he asked me, "What do you do?" And whenever anyone asks me that, I kind of have this blank, you know, like on their computer when it's loading and it's like, you're like, how long is this going to go? I get that blank stare because it's hard for me because, you know, I want to say, well, I'm a pastor. But then immediately I think, well, he probably has a million ideas of what a pastor is in his mind. And I don't think that most of them fit with who I am. And then I would say, well, you know, I help lead this community. It's like a church. But then I know that he has all these ideas about what a church is. So it takes a little bit to explain, but I like to do it. But you know, you may have friends and family who you have this same problem with. How do you explain our community? I know there have been people here who've been joining us who maybe have some family that don't join us, and sometimes the family will affectionately refer to this place as, "Oh, you're going to the cult today," but I know they mean it in a good way, so they mean it very. But sometimes, you know, I'll be putting together and thinking about, oh, what is something that we can put out on the marquee to let people know who we are and what we're about. And let me tell you, it's really hard in 15 letters to try to nail what this place is, okay? So I struggle a little bit. I can't tell you how many times I'm in this room on my knees with all the letters in front of me, and I'm like, oh, what do I do? So if you have any ideas and you want to come help me be my marquee person, I'm more than interested in that, okay? But the challenge that I think I come up against, maybe you come up against, is that we are a community that is trying to be spacious enough for people of any faith, people of no faith. And part of that spaciousness is that we are connected not by the specifics of what you may or may not believe, but by the way that we approach life, by the way that we approach spirituality, by our approach. See, I'm really not concerned with trying to be right, with trying to have the right, perfect answers for everything. What I am concerned about is creating a space where we can find peace, where we can find unity, where we can find connection with one another. Because I think that's what our world needs. Our world doesn't need just one person to come along and say, oh, I have the right answer to fix everything. No, our world needs connection. Look at how disconnected our world is. We're disconnected from each other, obviously, right? But then we're also disconnected from ourselves. We're disconnected from the planet. And I think one of the primary ways that we experience this disconnect, and I think it's alluded to in this poem by Rumi, is that we're disconnected by ideas. See, we have these ideas about ourselves and about one another that we get lost in. For example, you may have this idea about yourself that creates an identity. Oh, I'm this person with this job. with this type of family, with this type of lifestyle. And so then anything that comes along that challenges that identity is going to disrupt this whole world that we've built for yourself. Like, I know some of you, I don't want to offend anyone here, but I know some of you, you love the Wildcats, you love U of A, but it's like if they lose, like how do you, to kind of like, it kind of messes things up a little bit. I get it. Trust me, I get it. But then we have this like self-other paradigm where then someone walks in and they're like a Sun Devil fan, and then you're like, oh my gosh, I just felt the tension just rise in the room just now. Then these ideas about who we are turn into the us and them paradigm. We go, oh, I'm an American, so then I know who my friends are and I know who my enemies are, right? Or I'm a Christian, I'm a Buddhist. And we get stuck in these identities of who we think we are. And I think this goes all the way out to the cosmic level, that we become disconnected with our planet. I mean, this is Earth Month, and yet look at how we've lived in such a way that, oh, I'm a human, which makes us the dominant species on this planet, that we can just use the earth. The earth is something that we live on. It's not something that we are, or it's not something that we are truly one with, right? These are the ideas that we get lost in. And yet, we come back to this poem, out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there is a field. I'll meet you there. Rumi alludes to a place beyond these ideas that divide us. So how do we get there? Well, there have been two very ancient ways of approaching theology, philosophy, how we talk about reality. And these two ways are called the cataphatic and the apophatic approach. And I just want to be clear, I'm not speaking in tongues right now. This is Greek, okay? I'm going to start with the cataphatic approach. And this comes from the Greek root word kataphatikos. And this essentially means to speak about something in the affirmative, or to ascribe qualities to something as a way of understanding it. So in theology, you might say a cataphatic approach to theology is to say God is fill in the blank. God is love. God is light. God is father. God is mother. God, all these things, right? God is this. Or you could do this with life. You could be like, life is a journey. Life is a classroom. Life is like a box of chocolates. These are all ways to describe something. But there is another way of approaching these descriptions, or lack thereof, and it's called the apophatic approach. Now, I want to be clear. I wanted to make sure to put these words on the screen because this word can be confused. There was a time where I was at a conference and there was this person on stage and they were saying, we just need to be more apophatic. But I swear, me and the whole audience heard them say apathetic. And so the person behind me, they were like, And I was like, all right, if I ever talk about apophatic, I need to put it on the screen. It's not apathetic. It comes from the word apophatikos. And this means to speak about something in the negative. And what it essentially is saying is that you would, in theology, you would talk about God by saying God is not blank. So God is not hate. God is not a judge. It's describing something or not describing something through the absence, not the presence, but the absence of imagery. Maybe you've been on a faith journey. You might even consider it a deconstruction journey where you're not at a place where you would say, oh, I know exactly what I believe about God or reality or the universe. That probably is most of us in this room. But what you can say is, I know that God, or I believe that God is not just a bearded man in the sky, right? Or I believe that God is not just a judge sending people to heaven and hell. Or maybe you'd go so far as to say, I believe that God is not something that's out there, something that's separate, looking down, separate from us, right? But whatever it is, in a sense, the rejection of certain ideas has actually created a space for you. It's created a field. Sometimes there is a time and place for learning, but there is also a time and place for unlearning. There is a time in life for understanding, and there is a time in life to strip away our understanding. I know for me, in my experiences in psychotherapy, a lot of it in talking with a counselor has been looking at ideas that I've had about myself, about life, about my family, beliefs that I've held, and actually seeing them for what they are and getting rid of them. Not just adding knowledge about how I should think, but acknowledging how I have thought and letting some of those ideas go. I'm the type of person where I love learning. I'm obsessed with podcasts. And I love books, and I just love to if you tell me I have to go on a 12-hour drive, some people like Olivia, that makes her stomach turn. For me, I'm like, cool, that's like 10 podcasts, and I love learning about different religions and science and how everything kind of connects. But I also realized that there was a period of my life, especially the last couple of years, where I was just filling my brain with so much stuff, and it was actually disconnecting me from my experience of life because I was just filling myself with knowledge. There is a place for that, but there is also a time and a place to stop, to just be. That, as Dennis was showing us, there's a value and a strength in an empty mind. A mentor of mine says it like this: we don't know God because we know God. I'll say that again. Again, there's no right way to interpret this, but let it hit you however it hits you. We don't know God because we know God. Our knowledge can sometimes get in the way of the experience of life, our labeling. There's an ancient Chinese sage, wisdom teacher by the name of Lao Tzu. And Lao Tzu is believed to have written this book, the Tao Te Ching. Okay, and so the Tao, that word essentially means the way, the order of the universe, the way that things are. And Te Ching, the book. So essentially Tao Te Ching, the book of the way, the book of the path of reality, right? And Lao Tzu, we don't know for sure if Lao Tzu was a real person or if he was kind of his words and his teachings are the combination of many Taoist teachers. But what we do know is that the wisdom from this book is timeless and it's beautiful, and I would encourage you to take a look at it if you have not. It's actually not that long. And whether or not Lao Tzu actually was a person that walked this earth, I'm personally doesn't really concern with that. But there's this fantastic story about how the Tao Te Ching was put together, okay? And again, this story itself might be a myth, but it tells us a lot about trying to put the great wisdom teachings of the world into words, and sometimes the challenges that come along with that. So how the story goes is that Lao Tzu was the keeper of the wisdom, the archive keeper, the historian for this dynasty in China many millennia ago. And so he was believed to be kind of the wisest man in the empire. And yet one day, Lao Tzu becomes fed up with the politics, what's going on in his dynasty. And he says, look, I'm out. I just want to be done. I just want to go and live my life as a hermit off in a farm somewhere. And so he tries to sneak out. And as he's doing so, there's a guard, a sentry, a watchman on the wall, and they recognize him. And this guard thinks, I can't let Lao Tzu just walk away and leave us. Lao Tzu hasn't even written down all the great wisdom that he's accrued over his time. I can't just let this man walk away. And so he says, look, Lao Tzu, I'll make you a deal. I'm going to lock you up in jail. I love you. Thank you for all you do. I love you, but I'm going to lock you up in jail, and I'll let you go when you can write down what you've learned, okay? When you can pass on your wisdom. So 3 days later, Lao Tzu leaves that jail with what we now know to be the Tao Te Ching. And what I love about this story, what it tells us, is that this wisdom book is not the way. This wisdom book is not the path. What this book is the way or the path if you must put it into words, if you must diminish it to language, to a way that can be communicated. Essentially, Lao Tzu writes this book kind of with this reluctance, like the true way is unspeakable, but if you need me to put it into words, I will. And the first verse, the very first line of this book is this: The Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao. The name that can be named is not the eternal name. Now, a way for us to see this or translate this into more of a Western context would be to say this. Once we name God, it's no longer God. Once we've named reality, it's no longer reality. If it can be understood or communicated, it's not God, it's just our ideas about God, right? Have you ever tried to tell a story, and as you're telling it, you're like, you had to be there. You know, like you just, I feel like I do that all the time. I'm telling a story, and I'm like, this actually isn't a good story. It was cool for me to experience it, but it actually doesn't translate at all. Like you had to, sometimes I feel like I'm doing that on stage sometimes. Like I'm like, But a way to look at this, the philosopher Alfred Korzybski says it this way. The map is not the territory, okay? A map can be a tool. It can be useful. It can be helpful, but it is not the place itself. Here's a map of Catalina State Park. This will be helpful if you're going to Catalina State Park. But looking at this map does not substitute for the experience of actually being at Catalina State Park. I can even show you a picture of some of us at Catalina State Park for Wild Church. Now, does this substitute the actual experience of being there? No, it's a lot hotter and dustier, okay? But see, what's interesting is we have this addiction to maps, okay? Look at religion. Religion, in some ways, especially in our modern context, has become addicted to the Bible, to the map. But is the Bible the way, or is the Bible just the map? What do you call a book club that's been stuck on the same book for 1,000 years? Church. I'm good in here, but out there I'm canceled. Maps can be useful, but they also have limits. Because what they are, they're a tool. They get you somewhere. They help you do something. This might be a little controversial, but stay with me. I think in many ways, religion itself is a tool. It's a means to an end. Because have you ever asked yourself this, like whatever religion or lack thereof you grew up with, ask yourself this, is the goal to be a Christian? Is the goal to be a Buddhist? Or is the goal to be free? Right? And whatever method you chose, that was how you went about achieving that freedom. There's an ancient Buddhist parable. An individual is walking on a journey through the woods, and let's say that this individual, she comes across a river. And she knows that she can't just swim across this river. So she looks around, and using whatever she can find, shrubs, branches, she builds a raft. And she uses the raft to cross the river. And the Buddha asks this, having crossed the river, do you carry the raft with you, or do you leave it behind you? See, for a lot of us, religion, spirituality, they've been a means for us to cross a river, for us to accept ourselves. Maybe for you, it's been learning to open up. Maybe it's been learning to stop resist life and surrender to life. But sometimes we get attached with the method. We get attached to the raft. Religion, the word itself, if you break it down, in its most simple translation, it means to reconnect or to reconnect to the whole. And yet, if we're talking about reconnection, we're implying that there has been a separation, right? But for so many of us, we've been told that what separated us from the divine, what separated us from reality is sin. But I would ask today, what if what's really separated us is this desire for control that leads us to label and judge reality? For many of us, we were told the story of the Garden of Eden. And we were told this story in the context of the idea of original sin. And now in the context that I was told this story, I was always really, really mad at Adam and Eve. Because I'm like, all the terrible things in the world, all the horrible, horrible things, all the sin, you're telling me that all this happened because of one piece of fruit? I don't even like fruit. Like, fruit is terrible. I like fruit now, but at the time, you know what it is. Like, I could understand if it was like smoked salmon or something. But you're telling me for an apple, you'd bring all the evil into the world. But do you remember what that piece of fruit was called? It was a piece of fruit from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. That's right. That shame entered the world, fear entered the world with the knowledge of good and evil. And I wonder if today we might have a little shift and look at the Garden of Eden story as an allegory for duality. That we leave paradise when we become the judge, when we decide that we know what's good and what's bad. Have you ever had the experience of kind of leaving or being taken out or being kicked out of paradise? You know, like you have these moments of bliss where everything feels all right in the world. But then sometimes that can be gone in a snap. I'll give you an example. Have you ever been sitting on your front porch or back porch looking at a sunset? You're just relaxing and you're like, everything is perfect. And then instantly a thought pops in your mind. You're like, you know what would make this even better? Some cheese. You know, or you're like a cocktail, you know. You're like, it's almost perfect. It's really good. The sunset's great. Not too long ago, I was in San Diego and I was watching a sunset on these beautiful cliffs. And they're called Sunset Cliffs, really literal name, it helped you out. I was like, where should I go for the sunset? They're like, Sunset Cliffs. And I was sitting on there and then I was just like, I live in Arizona now and I totally didn't bring a jacket because I don't even know what I'm doing anymore with weather and temperature. And I was in paradise and then I wasn't because I was like, I'm too cold. Like everyone else, no one else is dressed like I am. So like they're smart, I'm dumb. Now I'm cold and dumb. And it was just the whole thing. And I was like kicked out of paradise. I have this problem. I've never shared this, but I mean, I don't know if anyone else can relate to this or it's totally just me. But I'll have moments where I'm just going throughout my day and I'll realize like, wow, I'm not worried about anything. And then instantly another thought will pop in and it'll be like, is that a good thing or a bad thing? Shouldn't you be worried about something? What were you supposed to be worried about? You were totally supposed to be worried about something. What was it? Oh, yeah, you didn't do your taxes yet. Oh, okay, great. Phew, I remembered the worry. I remembered the thing I was supposed to worry about. Thank goodness I remembered. And again, you just leave paradise. But just as Adam and Eve left paradise because of the knowledge in good and evil, Rumi is reminding us that we can return to paradise when we let go of the ideas of wrong or right. That the field is a place where we can just be. Now, I want to be clear. I'm not saying that there is no such thing as morality. I'm not saying that we shouldn't pursue good and fight evil. I'm not saying that, good and evil can't be known. But what I'm saying is, how often is evil in this world actually created from a desire for control and from fear that leads us to judge one another? Think about war. How often in any war that's ever happened in all throughout human history, one or both sides has said, we are right. What we're doing is right, and what we're doing is in an attempt to create a more just and better world. These justifications, they're judgments. Or how about on a more personal level? Look at any time in our lives that there's been a fallout within a relationship, family, friend, loved one, partner. So often it's because we are saying, I know how you should be living your life. I know more than you. Or I know what's right and I know what's wrong in this situation. And this is what divides us. This is what leads us to a world of duality. And now when I'm talking about judgment, I'm not even just saying like, judgment in the context of that's a really judgmental person. What I mean by judgment is something as simple as when we label reality, when we label things such as us and them, you and me, good and bad, who's in and who's out. Or one that we see all the time, you're either red or you're blue, right? This is the duality that we so often lived in, and it's the duality that's created the polarized world that we are now experiencing. And some of this is just reality, right? That there's you and there's me, and this is the experience of duality, but yet our spiritual traditions, many of them at their core, in the mystic heart of our spiritual traditions, they allude to a oneness at the heart of reality, a unity behind all things. That we may live in a world of duality. But our spiritual traditions would say that this is an illusion, that behind it, there is a non-duality, that there is a transcendence, that contained within the oneness, yes, we might have experiences of separateness. We might have experiences of you and me and us and them, but at the end of the day, behind it all, that there is a oneness, there is a non-duality. So what does this actually tend to look like in our lives? Well, we all live in this world of duality, but yet you may have experienced moments of non-duality, moments where you felt like you touched that place. What are these moments like? Well, meditation, moments where you drop the thinking mind and you just are, right? Maybe it's deep moments of love and connection, intimacy. Maybe it's making love. Maybe it's a flow state. Maybe, you're an athlete or you're an artist and in doing your craft, the thing you love, you've started to lose a sense of time. Have you ever felt that, where you're just one with what you're doing? Maybe it's any moment that you'd look back on your life and you'd say, well, that was a spiritual moment, right? Maybe it's deep moments of empathy, where you're sitting across the table with someone that you once would have called an enemy, but you hear their story and it breaks the walls down. Whenever those lines dissolve, whenever those labels drop, we're beginning to enter into the field. Out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there is a field. I'll meet you there. When the soul lies down in that grass, the world is too full to talk about. Ideas, language, even the phrase each other doesn't make any sense. Maybe you've been to the field, and maybe going there has actually opened up this larger question of is this only going to be brief moments that I ever get to experience this? Is life duality with just brief tastes of non-duality? Am I only ever going to have a day pass to Disneyland instead of an annual pass, But the question I would ask for us today is what if non-duality is something that can be practiced? It's a perspective that we can learn to adopt. And really my hope for this series, not that we will have an answer for what is the field, but really that we would develop a new way of approaching spirituality, that we would start to experience it. Not just label it, but experience it. That maybe the field isn't just this place that we go sometimes. But what if life could become the field? What if we could start to drop those labels, drop the duality in our lives? I'm really excited for where we're going to go in this series, and I appreciate you joining us today. I'm going to transition us now into discussions, and I just want to ask these really simple questions. What does the field mean to you? What do you think of duality and non-duality? And I wanted to leave this broad because at the end of the day, these are really kind of broad topics, but I just want us to begin to have the conversation around a non-dual spirituality.